send out notices that we are doing a new link, sir. I know we got some people who are joining with another link, and yeah, hopefully, we got some people who like family members trying to join, and they don't know what they're doing yet. All right, so we have had some technical difficulties, but I think we got it all situated now where we're actually here together. Welcome, welcome, and thank you so much for joining me today for this.
Thank-
So we'll give a couple of minutes for people to realize it's a whole new link.
yeah. Well, thanks for having me, Sheena. I'm glad to be here.
No problem, no problem. I'm extremely excited about this conversation because I know so many people need this conversation. And you may know very well because you help people all the time, and you see how much we don't know about the law.
That that is true. And I'm like, I wish my clients would have seen my video or seen my, post or whatever it was, blog posting, something like that. Otherwise, they would have never ended up becoming my client. So,
That's facts. It definitely, YouTube and so many other platforms is really making a great impact in this type of area. And so I knew this conversation would be really beneficial, especially to our clientele. They're really loyal viewers and always have great insight. And I always like to give them more knowledge. So this is literally a blessing.
yeah.
Thank you.
Well, I'm looking forward to dropping some legal knowledge today. So, yeah.
Awesome. So while we do have some people on, I'm seeing that some people are able to join, so that's really good. If you guys in the audience can actually just give us a thumbs up or a wave high or something to let me know you can hear and see us okay, that will be great. Just want to verify that things are transmitting well on that end, as we have had some technical issues. Thank you so much, She Fires. Welcome. So, well, I will go ahead and begin with our introductions. Thank you so much, DMV Renovations. I really appreciate you guys joining and being patient, as I know we were a little late. Technical difficulties is definitely the story of my life right now when it comes to this. We had a really nice, beautiful setup for you guys. So hopefully we'll have that situated next time we go live. So it'll be a little bit more fancy than this. But hey, today it's all about Mr. Attorney Joe here giving us the great knowledge, not about what things look like. So I'm
That's
excited
right.
about
It's
it.
it's the substance that matters, not the style. So, yeah.
That's great. That's right. You're right. So thank you, DMV Innovations, for coming with your questions. So just to make sure we introduce this thing properly, I'm Sheena Parker, also known as Mrs. Trouble. And today, our live is going to be really focused on really the viewers giving us questions and things, but we do have our markup of information we want to go over with our attorney here. That's going to help us with DC and Maryland laws. Um, but I do have to go ahead and put out there that while we all understand not everybody has the same opinions, we're going to be professional, we're going to be respectful, as this is a safe place for you guys to talk about things, all of us included. However, just be respectful of everyone else as well. Don't make any crazy comments or you will get kicked to the curb. Okay? So I am here as a licensed firearm instructor for those who don't know already. And during my experience of helping my students, we've come across some questions and some concerns. I'll share with you guys a little later some of the students that I actually had that called me after training that has had some legal battles. And so I'll get Attorney Joe to jump in there and kind of give me some insight on behind the scenes of that. But I will have him introduce himself as he can do a whole lot better explaining his background and how we got here today.
Sure. Yeah, so my name is Joseph Scrofano, Joe. I'm the founder of ScrofanoLawPC. We represent individuals under investigation or charged with a crime in the District of Columbia, Maryland, and Northern Virginia. We have three offices, one in DC, where I'm at here. I'm across the street from the Capital One Arena, so if you hear a little noise in the background, there's like a concert or game or something going on. We have an office in Rockville and Fairfax as well. I've been a criminal defense lawyer for close to 15 years now. I've represented a lot of individuals who've been charged with gun crimes, who've been involved in self-defense incidents. I also represent individuals in their appeals for DC concealed carry permits, as well as appeals of revocation of DC concealed carry permits. I've also been involved in litigation against the District of Columbia government for things like excessive force, Second Amendment violations. I was involved in a large class action lawsuit against the District of Columbia government, where we got a pretty large settlement for individuals who were charged with gun crimes back when DC did not even have a mechanism for people to apply for concealed carry permits. So my whole career has been dedicated to criminal defense, defending people who are in trouble. And yeah, that's a little bit about me and my firm. And like I said, I'm very happy to be here. You have a great channel, and I'm excited to drop some knowledge on the gun laws in DC and Maryland. One thing I do have to say, a little disclaimer: none of this is intended to be legal advice and not to establish an attorney-client relationship with any of the viewers, but it's all for informational purposes. And so I just want to put out educational information so that people never do have to call me, and that's why I'm here. So, and
Well,
also,
thank
oh,
you.
I should also mention my firm does work with a company called U.S. Law Shield. We do their members who get arrested. We represent them in Maryland and the District of Columbia. And U.S. Law Shield is basically like legal defense for self-defense. So if you're a firearm owner and you're involved in a self-defense incident, whether it involves the firearm or not, you basically pay a small monthly fee. And if you do, happen to find yourself in trouble, Law Shield will basically cover the representation, so you don't have to pay out of pocket, which can be pretty expensive. So, yeah.
And that's the facts. I just I just got off the phone with one of my previous clients a few days ago, and she was explaining to me why she's been a little MIA from me for about 2 years now because she was dealing with the legal battle, and she forgot that she had U.S. Law Shield. Okay. And at first, she went to try to get a lawyer or retainer, and she was saying the lowest cost she found was like $7,000, $6,000, somewhere around that price was the lowest amount to hire a lawyer to help her with her case. And then she remembered that she joined US Law Shield when she took one of my classes.
Yeah.
So, and she did. And she went and called and was able to get help. It was in Virginia, so it wasn't on your side of town. But yeah, she definitely did get help from US Law Shield just recent in the last 2
Yeah.
years.
And I mean, it's a great. They put out a lot of informational guides. You have access to there's two lines where you can reach out with questions if you're a U.S. Law Shield member. So if you just have any kind of general or what we call non-emergency questions, there's a number you can call to ask, and an attorney will call you back usually within like 24 to 48 hours. There's also an emergency line that is that's answered basically 24/7 by an attorney. It's really reserved for like when the cops are at your door, kind of
Mhm.
thing. But if you are involved in an incident, you can immediately get on the phone with an attorney because a lot of times, after a self-defense incident, what happens next in those first few moments can be absolutely crucial in determining what happens. Whether you get arrested, whether you get charged, what you get charged with,
Mhm.
you um, you know, end up saying things that incriminate yourself or just, make some mistake, once the police arrive. So it's a no-brainer in terms of what the cost is. It's a small monthly fee, I think like $20 a month or something around there. And
Mhm.
so, it's like anything. You hope you never want to have to use it, but if you do
Exactly.
have it, it's well worth it. So.
Yeah, we're gonna put the link in here as soon as I get it pulled up here. But we'll put the link in here for you guys to be able to join. But U.S. Law Shield is the name of that company, and Trouble is the code that you would give them with the special promo code from us from Trouble Defense, and so you'll get actually a great discount to be able to join using that promo code Trouble. So if you join U.S. Law Shield, give them promo code Trouble and you'll be able to get a great promo. Um, so I want to jump into the first line of business here. I know
Sure.
before previously you and I were briefly talking about like background checks, like the requirement for gun ownership. What type of things are they looking for, as in like red flags to say, okay, this person cannot get a firearm?
Sure, sure. Yeah. So when you purchase a firearm, you have to complete something called a Form 4473. It's like any kind of government form. You have to put in your name, date of birth, social security number, all that, address, information about the firearm that you're purchasing. In addition, it asks you questions, and these questions are basically, designed to determine if you're what's considered a prohibited person from owning a firearm. And a prohibited person can mean different things across state lines, but there is a standard federal law that applies across the board about what constitutes a prohibited person, being somebody that can't not only can't get a firearm, if they are caught with a firearm, can be arrested and charged with a federal crime. Now, each individual state may have additional, like in the more strict, the more strict gun law areas like DC and Maryland, they actually have, even more sort of strict requirements about who can and can't possess a firearm. But the form you fill out upon purchase is like I said, this federal form. Some of the questions that it would ask involve, like, have you ever been convicted of a crime that carries a maximum penalty of more than 12 months? That's basically, have you been convicted of a felony? Have you been convicted of a domestic violence misdemeanor? Are you subject to a domestic violence protective order? That's like when people are kind of in a bad relationship and one of them runs to court and files a stay away order against the other. If you're subject to one of those protection orders or stay away orders, that can bar you from possessing a firearm. There's also laws about it asks you whether basically asks you whether you're a drug addict or you use illegal drugs. And that's a kind of question that's sort of like on the honor code, but I don't know. It's it could be something like a medical marijuana card, and there's been some litigation in different states about this. In particular, technically, if you have a medical marijuana card and you say yes to the answer, or if you say no to that question about using illegal drugs, that could jam you up, and you could be charged with a crime over that. It asks if you're a fugitive, like if you have a warrant, if you have an outstanding bench warrant or something like that out there, that's going to prohibit you. It also asks if you're a U.S. citizen, or if you're an undocumented immigrant, you're in the country illegally. You're going to be prohibited from purchasing a firearm. If you were in the This is one that you hear a lot about, but if you're in the military or if you were in the military and you were dishonorably discharged, it asks that question, and you can't possess a prohibited person if that's the case for you. It also asks about, if you've ever been basically committed to a mental institution over the age of 16. That can also cause you to be a prohibited person. So it just basically sets out what's in the United States Code that basically lists who can't have a firearm. So
Okay, well, that makes a lot of sense. Now, I want to go back to that whole marijuana card thing because I know in the DMV area we have, the legalization of using marijuana, and there's so many students that I even come across that I'm like, hey, look, you're gonna have to make a choice. Either you want your marijuana or you want your firearm. It can't be both.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah. So can you give me a little bit more insight to, for example, if someone had a marijuana card, or let me do it the reverse way. Let's say they purchased the firearm first. They got a concealed carry permit. They purchased the firearm first, and now they went through the process of getting a marijuana card. How would that look for them if they had to use their firearm in line of self defense?
I mean, it's kind of a tricky question, because like that provision in particular is whether you use illegal drugs or not. It's actually not something that gets enforced a lot, and in fact, it was that was one of the some of the federal charges in the trial I get against Hunter Biden. He was at the time a drug addict, and he purchased a firearm, and he said no to that question. That's like the first prosecution that has come out of that particular provision in the statute in a really long time. Like it's a really hard thing to prove. So it's like anything. If you get caught, you're in trouble. And you could be charged with a federal crime, and that can really be, in my mind, kind of enough of a deterrence, right? Like you don't want to find yourself. I mean, you don't want to find yourself in state court, but you certainly don't want to find yourself in federal court. Being
Right.
charged state court is going to ruin your day. Being charged in federal court may ruin your life. So it's something somebody might not get caught for. It'd be kind of hard to figure that out, especially in some states. Like they treat the medical marijuana program kind of like private health information. And the feds don't necessarily like have access to who has a medical marijuana card, but you will be breaking federal law if you own a firearm and then you go out and get a medical marijuana card after that. And it would be easier to prove than someone who just smokes marijuana from time to time but isn't on record having a card like that. So it's
Yeah.
just important to make sure that you're complying with all the laws. So
Makes a sense. All
yeah.
right, let me go into some of this chat box here because I see first one person did ask a little while back, what's your hourly rate?
um so in my firm, we typically charge flat fees for our cases. One of the things in the criminal legal system is when somebody's in it, they have a lot of uncertainty. Like they don't know if they're going to jail, they don't know if they're losing their job, they don't know if they're losing their family, they don't know if they're losing their liberty. So the last thing we want is for them to have some ambiguity or uncertainty about what the bill is going to be. So when it's criminal charges, like 9 times out of 10, we are charging flat rate. So the least the client knows that there's certainty, and they also, we don't want them feeling like every time they get on the phone with one of us, it's like the meter is running. Now,
Mm-hmm.
said, there are some instances where we might do what are called hourly retainers. That might usually be when it's like more of an investigation as opposed to someone who's already been charged. We defend people for those like civil protection order cases that I mentioned. Sometimes we do hourly in those types of cases. And if I do hourly, my rate is $500 an hour.
Okay. All right, thanks. And then let's see, someone else. Well, they were just talking about the Fairfax area being expensive, and they're definitely right about that. When it comes to this one question, it said, let's see. All right, if someone breaks into my house, can I defend myself? Because the law looks like it doesn't want me to.
Yeah. So, I mean, I just have to kind of give a warning that, each state and the District of Columbia all have their own laws with regard to self-defense, and there's little distinctions in each of them. Some states have something called a castle doctrine, which basically says you can. If someone breaks in your house, there's kind of a presumption that they're intending to do you harm, and that you do have an ability to defend yourself, including with the use of deadly force without having to retreat.
Hmm.
Retreat meaning like trying to escape, right? The district,
Yeah.
like Maryland, for example, does recognize the castle doctrine, and so they don't require a duty of retreat when you're in your own home. The District of Columbia, on the other hand, does not sort of. It's sort of ambiguous in DC. They don't recognize it or sort of disagree with it. It's the analysis in most places when it comes to self defense is going to come down to two main factors in the force that was used. It has to be what's called subjectively reasonable. Like you had to have a subjective fear of death or imminent bodily harm, significant bodily harm. And by subjective, it means like you actually have to be afraid. Like you
Hmm.
personally have to be afraid that I'm about to die if I don't use deadly force, right? And then it has to be there has to be an objective reasonableness to your conduct. And what that means is like, would a reasonable person have been fearful for their lives under those circumstances? So I think of it like this: if the whole incident was captured by video, and there was sound, and the whole thing was on video, completely, at all angles, and a random person off the street who might be a juror who has no real connection or bias towards or against you, if they watched that video and they thought, you know what, that was reasonable for them to use deadly force in the incident, that's what the objective standard is under. self-defense. So it depends. It depends on what state you are. Some other states that I don't practice in are going to be, the laws and the jury instructions that they give on deadly force, and especially when someone breaks into your home, are going to be a little more broad and a little bit more favorable, and then other places are a little bit more strict. But the main thing is, the kind of consistent theme in all of it is that it's both objective and subjective standard that you have to pass. Were you actually afraid, and would a reasonable person have also been afraid under those circumstances?
Yeah. So I definitely have a student that, actually the very same student I was just talking about, who just called because she was dealing with a 2 year situation where
Mm,
she was able to make a deal, instead of facing whatever charges, which was up to, I think she said, up to 4 or 5 years in prison.
mm,
Um, where she was dating a guy, and the guy, and her had a disagreement, and they were in her home. She has cameras inside her home, thank goodness, right? But he got mad and he threw something at her and hit her in the face with it. She does own a firearm, but she did not feel, the situation sounds worse than what it was. She
sure.
didn't feel threatened for her life, so she decided to just tell him to leave. And he
Right.
told her, he's not leaving, when until he wants to, da da da. So she gets to, okay, well, I guess the police will come and escort you out then. So finally, she gets him to leave. Well, he knew that she actually had a firearm. I don't know why he would even take it that far with her, but she never pulled it. She never got it out at all. Um, and he called the police first to
Mm-hmm.
claim that she pulled the gun out on him. She even said that he described the gun incorrectly. First of all, he said that she had a black 9mm pistol and pulled it out on her. And unfortunately, that wasn't the case. She literally did not own a semi-automatic. She owned a revolver, a silver revolver at that. So,
Right. Right.
so yeah. So it was just like really ironic that she even had to deal with things, and a part of that was from her understandings that he made the claim first.
Yeah.
So when you experience people with domestic situations such as this, what will be your advice about when and how they should actually make these reports?
Sure, sure. And I'm sorry for your friend, and it's a story and a fact pattern that I've seen and dealt with so many times in domestic violence cases. The domestic violence court system is supposed to be like a shield for victims, right? But a lot of
Mhm.
times people abuse it and they use it as a sword. You know,
Yeah.
sounds like that's what happened with your friend. An area where I see this a lot is if people are going through a divorce and are in a child custody case. In family law in most states, there's actually a presumption that if one side uses domestic violence against the other, there's a presumption against that person, the domestic abuser, getting custody of the kids. So
Mhm.
sometimes what happens is people are in a nasty custody dispute, and one side will run to the police and claim that the other person hit them, assaulted them, or threatened them, and then they get this domestic violence charge against their soon-to-be ex-spouse, and now they've got a tactical advantage in custody and in the family law case. And so, the sad reality is, number one, if and I'm not trying to tell people like business or anything like that, but if you're in a toxic relationship where you might end up with the police getting called or being in the court system, get out of it and get out of it as quick as possible, because you're going to end up getting pulled into some civil protection order stuff, potential charges. But what it comes down to is you alluded to, which is who calls the police first. Who makes the report. Most of the time, when police respond to a scene, they're not going to do that much of an investigation. They're not going to ask tough questions. They're typically just going to believe what allegations they're being told. And in their mind, they're like, I got to make an arrest. The court system can figure it out. The jury can figure it out. The judge can figure it out. Now, that's not to say that always happens. Like, if one person calls the cops and then the police show up, and the person who calls the cops like has nothing wrong with them, and then the other person who they're reporting against, got black and blue bruises all over their face, that might end up in a situation where the person who calls actually ends up being the person who's arrested. So, the advice I tend to give is be the first one to call the cops if you're in a situation like that. I mean, don't make a false report, but if somebody hits
Right.
you threatens you, stalks you, something like that. It's sad, but be the one to report it, because if you're not careful, you could end up, in a situation like your friend, where she may have, or student may have even had to plead guilty to charges that she really didn't do, because what she was facing and the potential for what she could have got if she didn't take the deal was so much greater. And that's something I see a lot too. Is somebody may be charged with something, or if they're convicted, it's a 5-year mandatory minimum, and the government comes and says, okay, I'll give you a plea deal for 1 year or for
Right.
probation, and it's like, okay, well, I didn't do this, but should I roll the dice and potentially go to jail for 5 years mandatory, or do I take the probation and do something and say I did something, when I didn't, and it's
Right.
a sad reality in the criminal legal system.
Yeah, that's crazy. Wow. So, I mean, I can't imagine having to plead to something that you did not do. I mean, honestly, that would definitely hurt. um, yeah.
Yeah.
So, Madam Woman 23 said, "What's the law about shooting someone for stealing your dogs?" Their family breeds dogs, and they can cost it to 10K if on their property. What can they do?
Yeah. So, and again, like every state has different laws, so I can really only speak to the DMV area, but I do believe this is pretty consistent across the board. You can never, 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 never use deadly force in defense of property. And a dog is typically considered property. So the answer to that question is never. It, as much as the dogs may be worth, as much important as they may be to you, you really can. If somebody's trying to steal your car, if somebody's trying to steal your cell phone, like, you cannot use deadly force in defense of property. And in most places, the only amount of force you can use in trying to retrieve the property is like just a proportionate amount of force in response. And it has
Mhm.
to be like immediate, like you have to catch them in the act while they're doing it and try to stop. And you can use some force to try to stop them in the act or to chase after them or something like that. But it can't be a thing like 2 weeks later you find out the dog's at their house and you kick down the door and try to go in and take the dogs back. You can't do that either. So
Right.
it's something to be really mindful of. You can never use deadly force in defense of property.
I also heard somewhere around the grapevine that possibly service animals may be an exception to that. Is that
I'm not
something you
sure.
heard
Yeah, I've not heard that. So, I mean,
about?
I'd have to kind of look into that, but it's not something, it's not something I'm aware of.
Okay. Now, let's see. We had another concern here. What constitutes a mental institution? Is a treatment facility for treatment of alcoholism? What if someone sees a therapist or a physician? I'm sorry, a psychiatrist, and is receiving medication? And I think they're trying to say depression, ADHD, PTSD, any of those things.
Sure. Yeah,
um,
yeah, yeah. No, I mean, I get the question. It's not, if you have mental health issues, it does not, the question on the form and the whole, kind of spiel I gave about being a privileged person, if you have anxiety, if you're taking ADHD meds, if you're seeing a therapist, that's not really what it's meant to cover. The question is about commitment. Have you ever been committed to a mental institution? That usually involves being in a and I won't have this exact, but it's basically being in a facility that you can't leave, whether you
Involuntarily
right,
committed.
right.
Yeah.
Well, it could be,
Mhm.
you could voluntarily commit yourself,
Ooh.
and be prohibited. You could also be involuntary committed, but if I believe if you voluntarily commit yourself, you still can't leave till your treatment's done. You know what I mean?
Okay.
You're voluntarily saying basically, I know I'm going in here and I'm not coming out till they say that I've got my mind right. Basically, you know.
Okay.
So it's basically being in a mental health institution that you can't just leave at your whenever you feel like.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, someone else said, what can be done with someone who is under the influence of something and threatens you with a hidden gun, and the gun was witnessed by someone else and they have proof? How can you assure your safety or their safety? How can they ensure their own safety?
Sure. I mean that's a really tough question to answer, and I don't want to sound too much like a lawyer and say I can answer it. But it is pretty specific. I mean, I can really kind of only talk about generally, right?
What about the red flag law in reference to this?
Yeah,
It
sure. I
sounds
mean,
like that might be a good place for this type of situation. How would that process go?
yeah, so like Maryland, for example, Maryland has a couple of interesting things. Both Maryland and DC have provisions and laws for something called an emergency risk protective order. It's like a regular protective order, but it's when you go to a court and you say like this person has a firearm, whether whether they have it lawfully or not, and that they're a danger and they've made threats or they've made this, and you can actually get the court to order that they surrender their firearms, and the police will serve them with the paperwork, and they'll get paperwork that says you need to turn in your firearms to a police station. If they don't, they can be charged with contempt of court, and then at that point they can be arrested. But if someone has threatened you with a firearm, um, and there's witnesses and that kind of thing, I mean, you know it's always smart to call the police. You know,
Hmm.
uh, I really caution people on. It's more for the firearm instructors to go into like specific scenarios and things like that. I just caution people because, like in Maryland, for example, they have a crime called possession of a firearm during a crime of violence. And
Hmm.
even if you're just in like a misdemeanor assault in Maryland, they say they charge you with misdemeanor assault, and you have a firearm on you during that assault, or you use that firearm as part of the assault, that triggers a mandatory minimum 5 years in prison, even though the underlying charge is the misdemeanor. Now, on the other hand, Virginia has a crime called brandishing, which is where someone points firearm, and that's a misdemeanor in Virginia. In Maryland, literally can be charged with an offense that if you're convicted of, the judge has no choice but to sentence you to at least 5 years. I tell people in Maryland, because I see this a lot in like road rage incidents. What'll happen a lot in a road rage incident is someone's being an aggressor, is being a jerk on the highway. They get into it, they pull over, and that the aggressor might get out of the car, start yelling at the person, threatening them, etc. And then the person who's got the carry permit, tells them I have a firearm, or something to that effect, and then they back off. And that person goes to the police and reports to the police that the other person pointed their gun at them. And then the police
Hmm.
find them, arrest them, and they've got a firearm on them, and they assume it's true because they're like, how else would this person know that they had a firearm?
Right.
And I've dealt with this. Sometimes people just show it, like they'll kind of pull, they'll kind of show their firearm a little bit just because they think it'll kind of de-escalate the situation a little bit, and it
Hmm.
does, a lot of times. But you don't know what that person's going to do after that, what they're going to run
Right.
tell the police. And again, police tend to just believe what they're told when the person when they get a call, they're told this person pointed a gun at the other person. They're coming at that situation thinking you're armed, dangerous, and they're not really, they don't really view the allegations with any skepticism. They
Right.
just sort of go with the complaint. So it can be very can be very tricky, especially in places like Maryland and DC that have very, very strict gun laws. Other places, there are things. I grew up. I've been in DC for about 20 years, but I grew up in Texas, and there are things and cases that I've handled where I'm like, this wouldn't even be a crime in Texas. People wouldn't even been charged here for that, and it's like I got a client in the meantime now facing a potential 5-year mandatory minimum, and a lot of times over something they didn't even do. They're just a lawful gun owner who's possessed a firearm, and somehow the other person finds out. Or, it can also be a domestic sort of dispute, and their partner or whomever, there could be their brother, their dad, somebody. There's some kind of familial dispute, and because they know each other. The person who makes the complaint knows the person does lawfully own a firearm, and again, they use the system like a sword, not a shield, and it's really unfortunate. But you really have to protect yourself out there, and by and I'm in a legal sense, because and I tell this to all clients, like there is nothing more important in the world than your liberty, like
Yeah.
your ability. I mean, even people say family, God, all this stuff. Like you can't see family. if you don't have your liberty. You can't take care of family if you don't have your liberty. You're being told when to go to sleep, what to eat, when to eat, who you can talk to, when, I mean, it's really it's really important. There's in my mind nothing more important than being free.
Yeah, I mean, and I agree with you about that. I definitely need my freedom.
Right. Right.
So I want to go back to the chat real quick because I
Sure.
do see a concern here, and I have to agree with that concern. If someone, the MV Renovations was asking, will the person know that you filed the red flag law against them? So can you give like an anonymous tip to the police, and then the red flag law is enacted?
Sure. I mean, usually the red flag, they're going to know like who the petitioner is. Now, you could always, make an anonymous tip to the police about someone who's committing a crime, and you have to kind of understand the differences between the red flag laws and criminal laws, right? Red
Okay.
red flag laws are not actual charges. Red flag
Hmm.
laws are they're like civil cases where
Hmm.
what you're getting is a court order, and the power, you think, well, what's the big deal about a court order? It's just a piece of paper. Well, the power of a court order is that if somebody violates what that court orders them to do or not to do, now they can be charged criminally because it is what's called contempt of court if you violate a court order. So if you were to get an emergency risk protective order, for example, that's a civil case in which you're saying, hey, this person is a danger. They're not actually being accused of a crime. They're not being arrested. It's basically starting a civil case against them. And if you're successful, the judge will order them to surrender their firearm. So it's not really a vehicle or a mechanism for like heat of the moment altercations. You know what I mean? It's more of a process based thing. Like red flag laws is more like, you got a family member or a friend who's kind of, they're making some threats, or there's maybe some bizarre behavior coming at them, or they're maybe even talking about like killing themselves or something, like maybe they're going to hurt themselves, and so it's more
Hmm.
like something you do in a situation where it's kind of built up over time, and you're like, this it's a little bit dangerous for this person to have a firearm. And I think that because the remedy of it is not for them to go to jail. The remedy of it is for
Right.
the government to take their guns, or for the police to take their guns away.
And
And
how long? Just I know it may be case by case, but just in general, like what kind of expectation for time frame is a norm in those type of cases?
I mean, it's usually like a year.
Okay.
Usually like a year, something like that. I mean, it can sometimes be if it's like mental health related. It can be the kind of thing where like the person has to kind of go back and petition to get their rights back and to demonstrate
Mhm.
they got mental health treatment or something like that. So it can vary.
Okay. So I do see another question here. Someone asks if they can carry a gun. No, if they can't carry a gun, but their wife can, and she is not home, and the home is being robbed. Can the person that cannot legally have a firearm actually use the firearm for self-defense in the home?
Sure. That's a great question. And again, like with the same warning I always give, like each state has different laws. But I will say, like DC, for example, which is one of the most strict jurisdictions in the entire country about firearms, who can possess a firearm. Like if you have a firearm in DC, you have to register the gun. If you want to have a carry permit, you have to get a concealed carry permit. They make it very, very difficult to do both of those things. Except
Hmm.
if you have a gun that's not registered, they not only charge you for the gun, they charge you for the bullets. So you get charged with unregistered firearm and unregistered ammunition. That's a whole nother charge for the bullets. But even DC has a kind of safe harbor provision for what you're describing. So like, and even if you're a felon, for example, like there is a provision in DC, in the DC code and like the DC jury instructions, that somebody can momentarily possess a firearm to act in self-defense, but there's a lot of, like anything, there's restrictions to it. Like it has to be a really true you're in fear of death type situation. As soon as the threat is neutralized, you need to relinquish the firearm immediately. Like it really contemplates extremely brief possession of the firearm. And
Hmm.
so again, you know, if you objectively believe your life is in danger, and you said, and you or if you subjectively believe that, and your actions that you take are objectively reasonable, that's really what matters. Even if you're not permitted you're not actually permitted to possess a firearm. Again, as long as it's momentarily, just to neutralize the threat, and then you immediately relinquish the weapon when it's safe to do so.
So we already crossed over a little bit about brandishing. I want to talk a little bit about warning shots. So how does warning shots play into the law? Shooting in the air, or whether it's shooting at a small body part, technically is a warning shot.
Right, right. I mean, you know, it's kind of a matter of degrees, and it sort of depends on what happens to lead up to that. You know,
Hmm.
um, you know, it's kind of like the showing of the firearm or the telling. I usually advise people don't even mess with that. Like I'm like
Yeah.
again, you have to keep in mind too. Like I'm gonna give more cautious advice because I'm a lawyer, right?
Right.
My goal.
Hmm.
Die.
Right. So is there and I know some states are like a shell issue state versus a may issue state. Can you give me some explanation about that for DC and Maryland? Um, mhm.
And it was basically like, you had.
Uh-oh. Looks like you're 1 second. It looks like you're freezing a little bit there. Yeah, I see it a little on my end too, but not much. I can still hear you though. Okay. I still got this sign up for launch. Okay. Um, yeah, I think let's just keep going. If you guys still
Yeah,
have issues, let us know. Oh, it says you're frozen. So maybe if you want to try refreshing your screen, see if that would help.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll give you a second to do that. Thank you guys for letting us know, and I appreciate you guys with your comments and questions. This is really. I'm happy that we can help you guys. All right. So let's see if that changed anything. Can you guys still hear him even when he's frozen? Is the question. That's what I need to know. Is I know I can still hear you, but it's like you freeze for a second and then you'll go back and move a little slow, but I can still hear you just fine. Okay.
I mean, it's weird. I'm not frozen on my end.
Okay.
Uh,
So they said no, they can't hear you well. Okay. So you may have to, I'm scared to tell you.
I could leave and then come back in. I think that might. Let me
Yes.
try that.
Yes. Let's
Okay.
try that and see how that works. Okay. All right. So we're going to try having him to go out and come back in. Oh, now they say he's good. Well, we'll give him a second to, yeah, so they said that now they can hear you now. Okay, it was a delay. So I hope this information is really helping you guys. If you haven't already, please go ahead and give us a thumbs up for this. I think that we're doing a really good job of getting some of your questions answered. So I really appreciate all of that help there. Let's see. And if you haven't already subscribed, please do so we can make sure you guys are staying tuned to when we do have new people come in and talk with us in different new videos as well. We do have more really, really fun and fascinating, interesting topics that are coming up soon as well in the next couple of weeks. So I definitely look forward to helping you guys and talking to you guys about that. Let me see. I may have to send him a whole nother link. Let's see. Let me just make sure if it will let me do it. If he needs a new one, I'm not sure if he needs a new one. So hopefully, if he needs a new one, he got that. So I hope that might help. All right. So when it comes to, I know someone was saying about their dog being part of their family, and they very much would love to be able to defend their dog. Well, we think we pretty much covered that. Where we're not 100% clear about the dog being covered under protection if it is a service animal or emotional support animal. It may still fall in the category of property, most likely. And it also very much depends on what state you live in as well.
So, am
Yeah,
I still frozen or am I back?
no, I think you're perfect now. Yeah. As soon as you left, they were like, they hear you good and he's good. um, so guys, if you can give me a thumbs up to let me know he's okay now, his sound and vision. Uh, so so what was word was explaining about the shell issue versus may issue states and the difference of that.
Struck down. Supreme Court case called shall issue, and shall issue means to get your firearm. You're not a felon. You don't have a domestic violence conviction. You haven't been, all the stuff I was talking about earlier. If you meet
Mm-hmm.
that, they shall issue you a carry permit. Well, it's not.
Okay.
There's still some stuff that's floating around there that is a little bit questionable. Like, for example, what we have in DC and what I deal with a lot is DC has something called
Mm-hmm.
means that the chief of police has discretion to issue the permit. In order to be suitable to have a permit, you have to not have what's called a quote propensity for violence or instability.
Mm. Right.
Instability mean if you don't pay your rent on time, you get a firearm,
Right.
out of X's or something, or jobs a lot. Should you not be
Right.
able to have a firearm? I mean, what it really is just an ambiguous provision to do what he wants, which he gets to decide. And I see a lot of people getting their carry permits in DC denied, because they got some 30-year-old charge that was no paper, or some old arrest, some old PD will say, this person has a propensity for violence, or ruin, the Supreme Court case kind of, but it hasn't, because in the stricter states like DC and Maryland, I call it like they play a little game of whack-a-mole. The federal courts tell them, oh, you can't have this particular law, that's unconstitutional, and then they go, oh, okay, we won't have that anymore, and then they pass some new thing to make it more strict, and then you go through the whole court process and everything like that. Again, DC has actually had its gun laws stricken down a couple times in the federal court system. So
I'm glad that someone stood up for that. Thank you for your service.
right.
So, if someone was denied their concealed carry permit in DC or Maryland, what is the process for them to appeal that decision so they can be overturned?
Sure. So, the first step, so the way DC does it is you have to apply to get your handgun registered and your concealed carry permit simultaneously, right? Like you have to
Mhm.
get them both at the same time. And if when the chief denies you, which is a lot, they deny a lot of permits. When you get denied, you can file an appeal, and the appeal goes to something called the Office of Administrative Hearings. It's like an administrative court. It's not like superior court. It's not a criminal court. It's like an administrative court. You don't have the same rights you do, like as if you were charged with a crime. It's a little bit more informal, but they do tend to go a lot with what MPD wants. You know what I mean? It's a city kind of administrative court, and then if you lose there, you can appeal it beyond that to the DC Court of Appeals. And the DC Court of Appeals is like basically like the state Supreme Court. DC is not a state, but we've got the U.S. Supreme Court, which is for like the whole country, and then every state has their own court system, and most states have like a Supreme Court of their state. The DC Court of Appeals is like the equivalent of the state Supreme Court for.
Okay.
But I'll tell you, what I see a lot of people getting denied for DC, and what's a very hot issue right now is, we talked about before, you are a prohibited person if you're convicted of a crime that carries a maximum penalty of more than 1 year. So let's say you get charged with a crime and it carries a maximum penalty of 5 years, and you get
Mhm.
convicted of that. Maybe you only get probation, but the maximum legal penalty for the offense is 5 years. That is generally considered to be a felony. And so you are a prohibited person. Well, Maryland, for whatever reason in their criminal code, Maryland's got all these offenses that have maximum penalty more than 1 year, but they're still considered misdemeanors. So, like
Right.
in Maryland, you could be charged with second-degree assault, and that's got a maximum penalty of 10 years, but it says in the statute it's a misdemeanor, right? And Maryland's also got this thing called a PBJ, probation before judgment. It's a way
Mhm.
like where if you do your probation first, and if you successfully complete it, they'll dismiss and expunge the case, right? So
Right.
it's a good way to resolve a case usually, because you can get it off your record. You end up without being convicted, at least in the eyes of Maryland and the federal laws and everything. But if you're a Maryland, if you've got a charge like that in Maryland, and you try to get a DC carry permit, MPD, they'll go, well, even though it was a PBJ and Maryland doesn't count it as a conviction, we're counting it as a conviction. And so you have a conviction for a crime with a penalty of more than 1 year, so we're not going to give you a permit. And so there's actually a case right now that's up, that we're waiting to hear on at the DC Court of Appeals to say, hey, is this right or not? Like, can MPD just say, okay, even though it's not a conviction under Maryland law, because a lot of states have these type of programs. It's like, jump through some hoops, do your probation. If you do what we want you to do, we'll drop your case. And a lot of people take
Mhm.
those options. And I oftentimes advise people to take those options because you're in control.
Right.
If I do X, Y, Z, I'm gonna get my case dismissed. Whereas,
Mhm.
if I go to trial, it's who knows? Maybe I'll win, maybe I'll lose, whatever.
Right.
So again, this is just one of these ways where DC really tries to be strict and stop people from getting concealed carry permits. Is they say, well, you have something 10 years ago where you did a PBJ, and even though Maryland says it's not a conviction, we say it's a conviction, so we're denying you.
Wow. Have you
Yeah.
had, and I know we're getting a little bit to closing up here soon, but I did have one more question that I want to pose to you about lost or stolen guns. Two questions, rather, I
Sure.
guess. One, is it hard to actually submit a claim for a lost or stolen gun? And then two, once that happens, do you see often that people's concealed carry licenses getting revoked?
Yeah. Okay. So in DC, for example, they've got this long list that's like the obligation of a firearm owner, certain storage requirements, like all get a registered firearm and a concealed carry. See, um, you are one of those obligations is to report it if your firearm is. Always tell people that, yeah, you do want to report it if your firearm gets stolen because you don't want, if someone goes out there and commits a crime with that gun and it's tied to you, like you want to have some record somewhere that it's been stolen. And MPD will use, but at the same time, MPD may use that as may very well use that as an excuse to revoke your registration, and not because you did something wrong, but because they're literally looking for reasons. For even if you do get the permit and the registration, they're then looking for a way to revoke you.
Yeah.
And Maryland is very similar. It's actually also a requirement under Maryland law that if your firearm is stolen, you are actually legally required to report it. But again, Maryland's got the same kind of similar racket in the wear and carry permit stuff. Like they just don't want people to have it, and so they find any way to do it. I'll give one little anecdote, and I'll try to be quick about it because this was something happened a couple of years ago, and this is how crazy it is. Like, and I've done a lot of these appeals. So there was a shooting in like 2020 or something like that, maybe 2019, I can't remember, but there was a shooting on H Street Northeast. And what it was someone who had a concealed carry permit was robbed, and he fought off the person who was robbing him, and he used his firearm, and they investigated it and they cleared him like it was a good shot. Like he was clearly acting in self-defense. He was a victim of a robbery, and he used his firearm. Okay, MPD took that example and then started revoking people's permits because what they decided was they were like, there was a shooting on H Street with someone who has a concealed carry permit. So we now need to reevaluate the criminal histories of all the people we've already given a license to. So they then said, like, oh, well, they would literally like mail out these revocation notices to people who lawfully gotten a carry permit from them and had disclosed to them, and MPD was well aware of the 2005 DUI case that they had. Like it's not like MPD got new information. They literally just said, you know what, there was a shooting with somebody with a carry permit, and so we need to reevaluate everybody's criminal records who we've already given a permit to. And so it was like all these people who didn't do anything were just going about their business, had gone through all the hoops and everything like that. And then all of a sudden MPD came through and was like, oh, we're taking it back now, just because something else that happened. And what happened over here that, they used that as a basis of was someone lawfully defending themselves. Like that's what you're dealing with in DC, trying to get a carry permit,
Yeah. Someone said, if your home was robbed and you report it, they will still revoke your license.
I mean, look, I should be clear too. Like, I'm not saying that that's exactly what they'll do, and they may not if you report it stolen. I'm just saying, the only point I'm trying to make is like, you're lawfully required to do it, and you should do it. You should also do it because you don't want that person out there committing a crime with a gun that's tied to you. But it's the type of thing that I would not be. Let me put it this way: it's the type of thing I would not be surprised about if they did, because I've seen such other nonsense.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So yeah, U.S. Law Shield is definitely a must at this point. So actually, was going to be what my question for you now was: how important it is to have a lawyer to be able to call when these type of situations happen. So
Sure.
yeah. So if you had to give any advice, and now closing here, to our audience, what would you say about actually having a lawyer to be able to help with these type of situations?
Sure. Number one, people say never talk to police. I don't say it. I say never talk to police without a lawyer. Sometimes it does make sense to talk to police and tell your side of the story, but it never makes sense to do it unless you got a lawyer with you. Okay. So, we always, the kind of law shield is, if you're involved in an incident, shut up and lawyer up is what they say.
Yeah.
Lawyer up and shut up is what they say, right? And the value of Law Shield in that instance is if you're in an incident, it's like you make two calls: call 911, and then while you're waiting for them to get there, call the Law Shield emergency line and get on the phone with the lawyer. Because these next steps can really dictate what happens. We tell folks like, if you call 911, speak in passive voice. Like I've been burglarized and someone has been shot. Like don't speak in active voice. I shot someone. Someone has been shot. There's been a shooting. You know, um,
To describe the situation.
right.
Yeah.
We say ask for 2 ambulances, because you're going to need medical treatment. Whether you do or not, you may need to just go to the hospital and get your nerves checked out. And you want to be positioned in the incident as the victim if you're the victim. You don't want them to get there and get confused about who's who. So ask for 2 ambulances. Don't turn away medical attention. Take the medical attention. Like I said, your nerves may need to be checked just to calm down from what has just happened. And don't make any statements without a lawyer. There have been many instances where we've gotten calls on the emergency line. Somebody's been robbed, somebody, has been involved in some type of incident, and we don't make statements then, but we
Right.
may later, go have a meeting with the prosecutor, with the detective, with, myself present, and one of the lawyers at my firm present. And then you tell your self-defense story, sometime later, not when your adrenaline is up. This is actually something that happens in police shootings. They never require police to make a statement if they're involved in a use of force incident until 48 hours after, because
Wow.
they understand and they know that, like, you're not in the right mindset. You need to calm yourself, collect yourself, like get your thoughts together, and get yourself back to an equilibrium when you got all this adrenaline pumping and been through some traumatic event. Like, that's not the time to say something that they're going to hold you to forever. Like, let's say
Right.
you end up with a criminal charge and you say something different later than you do in that moment. They're gonna be like, well, you said this right after it happened, right? Well,
Mm-hmm.
my adrenaline was out the roof. I had just been through this very, scary and crazy situation. So it's important not to, and it's important to be polite. I always tell people, be polite but assertive. Assert your rights politely and respectfully. The magic words are, I'm asserting my right to silence. You know,
Okay.
and oftentimes, like I said,
Y'all got
I,
that? Repeat that again, please.
yeah,
What's the basic term?
these are the magic words. I'm asserting my right to silence, and it's important because this is the funny story. Like, it's not funny for the person, but it's crazy. There was a case that came out of Louisiana, like back in 2017, where the guy who was arrested, he told the police, I want a lawyer, dog, or just get me a lawyer, dog, right? And the Supreme Court of Louisiana came back and said, oh, he didn't really invoke his rights. For all we know, he may have been asking for a dog that's a lawyer.
What? Wow.
Rights. That's what it said. The magic words are, I'm asserting my right to silence. If you can't remember that, just start going lawyer, 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 lawyer. They'll back off.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
I hear you. So one person did ask, do you cover in Georgia? Uh,
No, no.
okay.
But the
With
Law
US
Shield
Law
does,
Shield.
like, yeah, Law Shield does. So, the way Law Shield works, like, I don't work for Law Shield. Like, my firm has a contract with them, and we represent their members who get charged or have incidents in DC or Maryland. They have lawyers like me in just about every state. They do in Georgia. I know the lawyer, and I know the lawyer in Georgia. His name is Matt Kligo. He's fantastic. So, I'm not there and I don't practice there. But Law Shield is the network of attorneys, like, all across the country that specialize in these types of cases. So,
Yeah. So Drew, just like DMV renovations, you could visit troubledefense.com, and on our website on the resources, you'll see a link for US Law Shield. You'll be able to click on there and be able to get in contact with people that way. If you need further information, you can always send us an email at shoot the and that's with three S's, I mean three H's, at gmail.com. So shoot the at gmail.com if you have any other questions, and I could be able to send you some links over for that too. But yeah, so when it comes to in closing statements, I just, you basically gave us some great advice about what to expect on a lot of fronts there. I would like to know what should be the expectation if I were to use a firearm in a self-defense situation. What should be the expectation as to what's going to happen next?
Well, I mean, it all depends on the facts and circumstances. A couple different things that can happen. One, you could be arrested right away. They could arrest you, um, you know, on the spot, and you're basically on the defensive. You need representation, you need a lawyer. You're fighting for your freedom. Two, they could try to get you to come down to the station to make some statements. You tell them, no, I need to have a lawyer first. I need to speak with a lawyer. And there could be some investigation period where, they're not quite sure, and, they might want to arrest you, but they're not sure. They want to investigate further. And so that kind of buys you some time, and you lawyer up, and then, it may make sense at that point for you and the lawyer actually to kind of tell your side of the story, explain the self-defense, maybe do your own, have the lawyer kind of do their own investigation. Are there security surveillance footages around, et cetera, et cetera? And so it's kind of like you live to fight another day. Or three, it might be just so obvious.
Mhm.
We've had cases where it's like somebody's getting carjacked at a gas station, and a lawful gun owner, shoots the person, and the police don't even arrest them because, and they themselves might go look and see the security footage or something on the scene. So you may be released right away, and be treated as really what you want to be treated in this situation, the victim, or what, criminal defense lawyers, we call it the complaining witness. You want to be treated like a witness, not like the suspect or the defendant. You want to be treated like the victim. And so in some instances where it's like absolutely obvious, you're going to see the best case scenario, like
Right.
that, where they may subpoena you later to try to testify against the person in court. They may want to, prosecute the person, et cetera. And so you're kind of like, on the same team as them, so to speak. So it's really like three possible scenarios. You could get arrested. They could start an investigation, and release you, but be investigating you, or they could immediately recognize that you're the victim in the situation, or the complaining witness, and treat you as such. So,
Well, that definitely. I wanted to make sure I shed the light on this for everyone in closing, because I want everyone to understand that there is some process of some next steps. It may not be plain, just black and white that you are acting out of self defense, and there has to be an investigation to prove your innocence. So when it comes to that, so you guys have to understand that there will be a process with that, but as Attorney Joe said, definitely lawyer up before you
yeah,
begin to talk.
right,
So I think for me, that was the biggest thing I took away from this, is just remembering to lawyer up before you begin to talk. It's really important to know that, because, like you said, your adrenaline could be running, and you say, blabbermouth, you just say all types of things, and may even say some things that may not even be exactly the way you mean to say it. So
exactly.
yeah, I love that you explained that much. So I do want to tell you again, thank you so much for joining us tonight. This was really, truly amazing. And I know all the viewers out there, I know you guys appreciate it as well. Uh, Please let us know. One, I know for first off, people who are in DC, who are in Maryland, they can definitely have you, I guess, in a sense, like a retainer on retainer if they're joined through US Law Shield, for sure.
That's right.
Um,
Right.
so U.S. Law Shield could be one way to have you as their attorney if they ever need. If you're not in the DMV area, you can also join through U.S. Law Shield to be able to get services for lawyers across the United States.
That's
But
right.
if anyone needed to get in contact with you directly, would you be willing to give that information?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So there's a couple ways to reach me. Go to our website, scrofanolaw.com, SCROFNO law.com. We also have a YouTube channel. It's at ScrofanoLawPC.com. We do videos on criminal law topics, cannabis law, self defense, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
And also, you could email info at ScrofanoLaw. Really, any of those
Hmm.
you can through the website, through email, channel. I
Great.
try to respond to comments and all that stuff, questions, things like that. And we don't just like firearm stuff. It's pretty much all criminal law, DC and
Hmm.
Northern Virginia, civil protection orders, expungements, DUIs, federal cases, all across the board. We've got a great team. There's everybody's here has got at least 15 years experience. I got lawyers in Maryland and Virginia, 25 plus years of experience doing criminal defense, former public defense. And we really care about protecting our clients and standing in the way of the government when they're trying to put them in jail. So.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. And I can definitely tell, just even speaking with you before this, I can tell how much you really care about the people and helping the people with things. So, again, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm not going to hold you guys up any longer. I know you guys need to get some rest. But I just want to tell you guys, please, if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please do so we can make sure we keep bringing you awesome content. And also like this video so that more people can be aware that it was a likable video to watch. I just can't even tell you express my gratitude. Thank you so much. I learned a lot today.
So much, Sheena. This has been so much fun. I'll be happy to do it anytime again too. Thank you.
That's great to know. I definitely will take you up on that offer.
All right. All right. Well, have a good night, everybody.
All right. Have a good one, you guys. Thanks so much. All right.